Stanley could
See,
read.
okay,
Okay.
that's it going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great, great. Thank you, Eve, for telling us that. I never would have gotten it.
Gives me horrified memories of the first time I was did an interview last summer, and I was so screwed up with Zoom. Had my wife trying to help me. We couldn't figure it out. We were about 20 minutes trying to figure it out. It was just
Hmm.
nightmarish. But anyway, it's all better now. But let me lead into how those last two retrieval things came about. It's an interesting story because I never could figure out how to do YouTube Live, even though it's been available as an option for the longest while. And I would see other people doing it and think, well, it can't be that hard. And what I've done for years, you look at all my old videos, they're recorded on the camera of my computer and then loaded up to YouTube and then deleted from my computer. And that worked fine for years. But recently, because of, I guess, carelessness with overloading the memory of my small computer here, the amount of time that was available for YouTube videos shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and I couldn't figure out why. Anyway, I used to be able to do like 35, 40-minute videos, and now it seemed like it was down to about 10. So I went through this process of putting things on a memory stick, all this text files and whatnot. And so gradually I had more. But when I was the first time I tried to do YouTube Live was the day before, the day before the Moscow situation. And I felt a contact with this long deceased journalist, Danny Casolaro. And there's a 4-part documentary on his journey and his discoveries of illegal activities in both intelligence agencies and government and whatnot, and which wound up him getting killed. It's called The Octopus Murders. It's on Netflix. And some younger journalists had taken up his cause, got his notes, and made this long documentary, which I really was fascinated with. It goes right back to the Iran-Contra times and illegal drug running in order to get guns to the Contras because Congress wouldn't let them do it, all that sort of a thing. And it's more complex than that, but just to give you a bit of a time frame. So after watching 4 episodes of this, I repeatedly felt Danny Casolaro's spirit around me. And I thought, okay, I've had this before. People want to talk, people that I'd never given much thought to before. Even though I had read books on his work, like 10, 15 years ago, this documentary really brought it into the public eye. So I asked, he said, I'd love to talk. And so I tried to do a YouTube Live the previous night, and it did not work. I fiddled about and fiddled about. I could not get it to work. And I kept apologizing to the spirit and saying, Danny, I'm working on this. I'm working on this. So finally, I did these 2 10-minute videos where he speaks about his pleasure at seeing a lot of the truth uncovered and put into the public eye with his dog. And so I did 2 10-minute things, and they're up on my regular YouTube Word of God site. So the next day I was fiddling about with the live thing, and it's about lunchtime, and I was in a coffee shop, and I saw these early reports of the attack in Moscow, and I thought, okay, this is probably a time to see if I can do a retrieval in public. And again, I fiddled about with the YouTube Live thing, could not seem to get it to work. And I mean, there's not a lot of instructions, but boy, it just doesn't work sometimes. Anyway, suddenly out of nowhere, it worked. And if you watch this 24-minute kind of live video, which is up on my Facebook page, you'll see me looking at the camera going, well, I think I'm live, but I'm not really sure. And that's because I wasn't. Anyway, so then you'll see the thing unfolding. And I did like I would do a disaster retrieval years ago, where I would use the hemisync tapes and focus. And as you know, I've spoken about not needing the hemisync tapes for a number of years, even though they are fun to do. The space they put you in is very pleasant. But I haven't used them for ages. So the projection in this coffee shop was in real time, and you'll see me kind of stumbling around a bit and going, well, what am I going to do now? And yada, yada, yada. And of course, you can edit all that stuff out when you do it, but you can't. I don't know if you can edit live stuff. But anyway, I was so amazed that it worked. I was like, oh my goodness, here we are, we're doing it. So I did it. And what you hear me talk about and describe is pretty much what happened. It's a bilocation situation. Um, and what I've been practicing for the last year, projecting from the conscious state, not being in a meditative state or a sleep state. And I've been doing it last summer quite a bit. And it's based on the assumption that when spirit people talk, like spirit residents, the dead, talk about being able to think themselves instantaneously from one place to another, I thought months ago, well, if I'm projected, as I often do, why can't I just, once I'm out of body, why not just project anywhere I want instantaneously? If they can do it, why can't I do it? So I eliminated all my intellectual sort of doubts about it and started doing it. And it worked quite well. And you'll see a lot of them on the series called, out of OBE Journal 2023. There's quite a few of them there. And so this one was just me after talking about it. Somebody asked a question a while back, could I do it from, a public place? And I said, yeah, if there's not too many interruptions. And, people saying, hey, what are you doing? Or whatever, you can do it. And that's, so what you see is that. And again, I was a little nervy because I thought, well, this YouTube live thing, is it going to keep working or is it going to suddenly stop? I didn't really know. It went on for about 24 minutes. And I thought, okay, I've done enough. I'll come back later. It was obvious there were more, the numbers of injured and deceased seemed to be increasing by the hour. And I did retrieve 3 people, 2 guys and a young woman, I think. And they were all fairly young. They'd been to this rock concert. It seemed to me they were all like 30 and under, but I'm sure there was a lot more, but I only got to do 3. And I was given sort of, before I started, I asked Spirit, I said, okay, are the retrievers already there or do you need my help? And I was told right away, no, we need your help. Come on, do it right now. So, and I've been in that situation with guides for years. If you ask a question, you'll get an answer. There has been the odd retrieval situation years ago where you ask and say, okay, is there any need for more retrievers? And they'll say, no, it's okay. We got that all taken care of, yesterday or the day before or whatever. So there is the odd chance they might say, oh, no, don't bother coming. It's fine. But most of the time they'll say, as I heard that day, do come right away. So that was the experience. And as you'll see, I'm just fumbling around for technical reasons, not for the actual retrieval work. I know how to do that. I know how to approach people. I know how to move people out of their perception of a collapsed building, which we'll get to in a minute, or their perception of I'm dead, I can't do anything, or I'm going to hide here because I don't want to get shot. There's a number of reasons that people will lie in a heap in a corner. There's quite a few reasons they'll do that. So that was that experience. And then, as I recall, David, I think David emailed me fairly quickly afterwards and say, hey, Gord, did you just do this? And so I was kind of like, oh, wow, great, it worked. I didn't really know. And then I had another friend, not in this group, Casey, emailed me and said, Gord, I had a look, but it's private. So then I had to go back and fiddle with the my YouTube channel instructions and make why this video was suddenly private when every other of my, like, God knows how many 200 videos have been public. I don't know. Just don't know. Anyway, I finally made it public, and then some other people could see it. So a day or two later, the situation developed in Damascus. And again, I was probably sitting having coffee somewhere and doing my emails or whatever. I do that most mornings. And I noticed this news item about a missile had taken out. There was already pictures at that point. Something that was claimed to be an Iranian consulate in Damascus. And I thought, okay, I'm probably needed there. This only happened a couple of hours ago. So I sat down and projected. And I don't think I was able to do it live. No, I wasn't. So I had to do a recording. So it's quite brief. You'll see, I don't know, 10-minute or 15-minute things that I put up on YouTube. And I did discover something very interesting because when I do that, and I have to use the old style YouTube where I have to upload from my own computer. While I'm uploading from my own computer this 10-minute video, I have to wait. I can't do something else while that's uploading. So limitations of a small computer, I guess. So I realized that what I had done when I finished the first part, because the timer's going on my computer, I know I have to get off. I exercised, how shall I put it, a psychic ability that I hadn't fully realized that I had. Now, you'll perhaps know from accounts that you've read of people's abduction experiences with extraterrestrial biological entities. There are some references to the fact that the person will say, well, they took me out of my body, but everyone around me was in a kind of a freeze frame and didn't do anything, couldn't. They sort of freeze framed the whole scene. And then later they brought me back and undid the freeze frame, and suddenly everyone's doing what they were doing, talking or whatever, without realizing that any time had passed. So I hadn't really given that much thought over the years. It wasn't like I planned to do it, but I suddenly realized when I went back to the second time to the bombed out consulate building that a woman that I had started to retrieve, I'd put on a sort of pause because I was gone for 10 minutes. And so again, another of these talents or whatever you want to call them that you don't actually consciously know you have until you sort of give it a go. And that's very new for me. I don't ever recall doing that before, although I may have done it, in an unconscious state and when I was asleep or whatever. So you'll see a little reference to that. And the first two guys I retrieved there were kind of, as you'll see, very sort of mid-level, upper-level military guys, and trained to distrust anybody. And of course, they've just been bombed out of their building, and they didn't really trust me. They weren't insulting, but they kind of stood back and talked to each other like, "Oh, can we trust this guy? Is it real?" But the woman was a little more flexible. She still didn't trust me, probably because I looked too Western. And they all asked, "Are you going to take me to the heaven that I belong in?" And that'd be some kind of Islamic heaven. But I said, "I'm taking you to a retrieval center where you will be accepted by people of your own culture. Don't worry about it." And because I know that always what happens. You just take them to where they belong, and someone will be there to retrieve them or to welcome them rather. And it looked like a sort of my vision in the other worlds isn't as detailed as Jurgen or Mike, but I get the job done, but I can't really describe it that well. And whereas Mike's incredible, he can tell you what the door handles look like sometimes. And to give you an example of his penetration of detail. So I got them to the door of this sort of temple-like structure, like a small temple that I imagine our astral architects had created right, in a few seconds, as they can do, as these folks can do, just to make these people comfortable. Now, what version of, what type of Islamic tradition they belong to, I didn't know, and it didn't really matter. But I was hoping that, hope this is the right place for them, and I did get them to go in, and they walked in the door, and I left them. So that's two fairly short videos. They're fairly self-explanatory. I talk about what I'm thinking and trying to do as I go along. I haven't rewatched it since, but I'd be happy to answer questions on either of two things. David might have some questions. How about you, David?
Okay, well, if you look at the chat, you'll notice that I put Gordon's YouTube address in there. It's like one of the first things I wrote. If anybody wants to look at that YouTube later on that he just discussed, it's the word of Gord is a YouTube thing. So that's in there. The question I have is, I was wondering, see this method that you've developed like last summer where you don't have to go into a full meditation, you're conscious. And you've many YouTubes about that. I was wondering if anybody else in the group is able to do or has had the same experience as Gordon has. Okay, Irene.
Yes, mine very often happens just unexpectedly in the beginning, and then when I started to do more, I could just sit, and then it would happen. I haven't done the same as Gordon. I haven't done any retrievals. It's just that I've just done out of body, and I've found myself in places, whether they be in this dimension or another dimension. I've never really understood that part, but I don't have to be asleep to do it. I remember one time I was going somewhere, and this was it was about 5 years ago. I was going to a stately home that was run by for meditation purposes, say. And I was a bit concerned because I was traveling quite a distance. And I do remember sitting there contemplating, and then the next thing I knew, I was seeing all these pictures on the wall of trees and scenery and etc. And then I came back into my body. And then the next day, when I went to this stately home, all these, I was told I'd come early and then to go into this room and wait till everybody arrived. And on the walls were all these pictures that I'd seen the day before. So that is, I'm not sure if you call that remote viewing or whether I was out of body, but I was very, very conscious of it. I'm still trying to get to grips with all this out of body experiences, because initially they started, without. I'm not in my own consciousness. I've not been asleep, etc. But say you sort of daydream, if you like, or and then the next thing you know, you're somewhere out of your body. Talking about, I'd be interested in what you think of this, Gordon, because I have done the HemiSync program with the Monroe Institute. But I never found it up to yet. It hasn't worked for me. I've done this out of body, like you say now, you do it naturally. Well, I've always done it naturally. So I don't think it's worked for me, really.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. I mean, I'm sorry it didn't work for you. I know some people. Which did you do the Gateway program?
Yes.
Okay, the issue with the Gateway program, as far as I'm concerned, talking to people years ago, was it didn't take you to the right focus level. I think it took you to focus 15 or something.
Right.
And the set of tapes that I bought was called Going Home. And that took you all the way through all the focus levels to focus 27, which is past focus 24, 25, 26, where all the belief system people are, and focus 27 is where the sort of free thinkers are. And I found that very useful. And they just set it up to get you to that focus level. And the people that did the gateway, and I talked to a bunch of people by email that did it, enjoyed the experience, but found that it didn't get them where they actually wanted to go. And I think with the Monroe is they would have you take the gateway course and then come back in a few months and do the next one.
Right, I see. You see, the thing is, I just think you do it naturally to don't, I think you can go to the Akashic Records, you can go here, you can go wherever you want, really. It's only
prior to that, I did my first book, Eternal Life and How to Enjoy It, on recalling lucid dreams.
Yeah.
And then after I did that, with help from a guide, of course. And after that, I came across Bruce Moen's website and the Hemisync tapes, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And I thought, oh, I got it. So I used those to give me to get me away from waking up in the morning and remembering a lucid dream, so that I could meditate with the Hemisync tapes in the middle of the day and have an experience right then.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I think these things are tools, aren't they, to help?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. No, but at least if you can do it naturally, then that's great. Why not?
Yes, but I'm not always going where I want to necessarily go. So maybe I'll go back and I'll have a look at that going home then and see.
Yeah. I find if you just declare
we
your
never stop
intention
learning
firmly.
Pardon?
Just declare your intention firmly before setting out, and you will go to where you want or need to go.
Yeah.
And I just wanted
I don't see why it should be any different, really. When I communicate with spirit and I set my intention, whether it be for communication or healing, it's got to be the same thing, hasn't it, really?
Yeah.
You set your intention.
One's intention determines the outcome, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Has anybody else had the experience like Gordon where you're not really meditating and you're able to do something like this? I'll volunteer because I have been able to. But my meditation is no longer sitting in a dark room for every day, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, I tried for a couple of years. I went for a whole year of even getting up to a couple hours trying to do it and breaking the day up into two, and I just got fatigued. And so the way that I meditate is nature walks. I'm in an area where there's a beautiful park, and I go in there, and I've watched a lot of Gordon's YouTubes, and I got to the point a couple times when I just said, okay, does anybody need help crossing over? I'm here to help you. And I believe that I've had a couple of them. Not as clear as Gordon's, real foggy at this point, but I think I'm heading in that direction, but very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe like in the beginning, maybe I'm at the beginning of where Gordon was like 20 years ago.
Well, I don't think it's going to be that long a climb, David. I think you're making fairly good progress.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I just say, I don't think anybody needs to be in a dark room. Mm-hmm. You can meditate anywhere.
Yes.
It's where you put your mindset, really, that counts. Not where you are, it's where you are internally, really. That's my, as long as you can put yourself in a situation where you're relaxed and able to move forward.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if anybody's got any questions, we can start that now.
Yes, I think I put one in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Still learning to manipulate this thing.
I guess while we're
there we go.
While we're waiting, I have a quick question for Gordon, maybe for Irene. in using the HemiSync, does it make a difference, or if you found a difference, whether you listen to it without headphones or with headphones? Does it matter?
Oh, for me, I tried both. I tried the headphones are what really make it work for me.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I use the headphones with it as well.
Carol, you said two hands are up. Richard was one. Who's the other one?
I don't know, they went down before
It
I.
was my hand, but I took it down when we were
Okay,
starting the
okay.
questions.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, who was that? You just speaking, Irene?
Yes, I put a question in the chat. Am I allowed to ask it myself, or do you need to ask
Yeah,
it?
you can go ahead and ask it.
So, well, I asked, you know, Gordon, the retrieval of these souls, is that because they need retrieving because of the violent trauma in which they find themselves? Because I've always been led to believe that our loved ones are there to meet us when we pass over. So is it due to the circumstances that these people in Moscow needed you for retrieval?
Yes, in traumatic situations of war or natural disasters like earthquakes and floods and fires, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
They're in quite a state and
Right.
very upset and confused, and they're not thinking about what, you know, meeting their relatives and that sort of a thing. That's a more sort of for a more natural death, shall we say. The same with
Right.
you know, everyday car accidents and stuff. Those people tend to be messed up too. Plus, you've got all these people that don't believe in an afterlife at all, and they don't have
Yes.
the right
Yeah.
kind of thoughts to get through. So, you know, sometimes guides help them, you know, astral plane guides, and sometimes it has to be someone like me who's closer to physical reality so that our vibration is a little closer to the recently deceased than an astral plane guide is.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I can say a little bit more about that, Irene, because I also work with a priest. I have been a couple of years working with him. He's the one that has all the talents, and he does the crossovers, and I just assist him by talking to some of the dead people. And I'll tell you what also fits into that category: suicides. There's people that feel guilty. Like we did this one case where this airplane pilot, the whole thing crashed, and he thought it was his fault. It really wasn't, but he couldn't get it out of his mind, the guilt that he had. So guilt has something to do with it. And then if it's things that have happened like drownings and that, where they're kind of lost, they're not sure where they are. And a lot of these cases, they go to the afterlife hospitals and get counseling, and they need help for that before they are able to cross over. So it takes time, because we always, with this guy this priest that I work at, we try to figure out what the timetable is when it happened. And I mean, it can go back. We've had some that have gone back to the 1920s, and they've been over there, you know, for 80 years. And so their rehab takes longer, and there's a lot involved in it.
Well, that's very interesting, David. I didn't know you did that.
I don't really say much about it because I feel that I should ask this guy's permission if I can talk about it, and I haven't done that. But
Oh, I see.
just in general,
I have heard about the hospitals and souls having to be taken and nurtured, but
yeah,
is that just because of the trauma and whether it be suicide, accidents, or war?
Well,
Do they only go to the hospitals because of trauma?
Well, if they're really sick and they have some kind of disease, they need to get. I don't know if it's why, but if their brains or their psychic needs to get healed on what happened. For instance, my mom, she was really sick for a couple of years before she passed over. And I had a reading by a medium, and they had said that my mom really was sick, and it's been a while that she's been in this afterlife hospital. And so I don't think it was like emotionally that she had to get her problem solved. It was more of a physical thing. So I guess I really don't know the answer if it's
Yeah.
just.
My own mother was quite ill before she passed, and she was in an afterlife sort of nursing home. I wouldn't call it a hospital; it was like a small nursing home. And I visited there a few times, and the doctors and the personnel there just cater to your illusions of still being sick. And the patient eventually gets out of it and feels
Yeah.
they get well on their own schedule.
I think that's a very good answer, and that's how I would answer about my mom. I think that's what it was with her.
Mhm.
I do think your mindset and what your beliefs are play a part in it as well. Because I was doing a sitting for someone, and her auntie came through, and she'd only been past 4 hours, but she understood about the afterlife. You see, so there's a difference, isn't there? Then.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, some people do a very quick transfer, have very few issues, and are available for comment as you experienced.
Yeah.
Richard.
Yes, this is for both you and Gordon. Are you aware of how much your mothers knew about the afterlife or believed in the afterlife?
My situation was the oddest thing. My mom was in not a nursing home, an assisted living home, and she, as far as I know, she wasn't psychic at all her whole life until the end. The last 3 years, she started to develop, and she would tell my brothers and me that she was traveling out of her body, and at that point, I knew nothing about it, and my brothers, they were saying mom's having hallucinations, and we took her to a neurologist, and we went through that whole thing, and they didn't believe her. They thought that she was schizophrenic. My brothers did, and that started my whole thing about 3 years ago. I was going to prove to myself and my brothers that no, she's not. Something is really happening with her, and so I forgot your question when I was talking about that. Oh, you were saying did they have any psychic experience? And the answer is yes, my mom did.
Well, I was wondering how much she believed in the afterlife and what she knew about it. In addition to these experiences that she
Yeah, it was
had.
mostly religious. There's a heaven and that. I don't think she knew what was going on when she could do this, and it really worried her quite a bit. And but it was a wonderful reading that I had because the whole family that had deceased showed up, and everybody was happy. I mean, it was glorious that I got to talk to all these people and see them again and see my mother and both parents and grandparents and all that.
Can I just say something? A friend of mine, he died suddenly. But all the years I knew him, about 20 years, he did not believe that there was an afterlife. He didn't believe in God, anything. He was quite an altruistic person. He was a man of all sorts of sides, really. He did a lot in the nature world and a lot of charity work in that respect. But also at the same time, he did portray a lot of selfish traits. And he was proud of it. He was one of these that was gung-ho about everything, and he didn't believe in anything. But I have to say, he did come through to me not long after he passed, and he said, "I know I didn't believe everything you told me, but it's absolutely wow over here." And he and this, that, and the other. So you see, I don't think it matters what you believe.
Yeah.
It's proven once you pass over. But having said that, he was the last person I was expecting to come through, because he got such a mindset about it, or whether it was all bravado, I don't know, because I found out a lot about him and how good he was, and yet he tried to put on a different persona, you know, that he was very selfish and he didn't care about anything or anything. And then I found out a lot of charity work that he'd done and all that sort of things. So you see, I don't know really, but anyway, he came back with it was a wow over there, absolutely wow, you know. So it's just open to the mind, isn't it, really?
Yep.
Consciousness.
Who else has got some experiences to share with us?
I would just like to add something here to what we are talking about. I would like to share my father. He's a special person. He's, what would I say? A psychopath, a narcissist. And he have never thought about spiritualism. And when I saw spirit when I was a child, he was more like the opposite and told me that he needed to lock me in. And yeah, you know. But anyway, I have barely had any contact with him the last 10 years. And he now is in dementia. And I have been told that in 3 months he's leaving this world. But he had asked me the last year to send him healing spiritually. He have asked me. So, and of course I have, because I want his transition to be as smoothly as it can be. And just 2 weeks ago, I was received the last message from his higher self, and he thanked me for guiding him into the spirit world.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So yes, they do aware of the other side, how beautiful it is. That is what I can share.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Does anyone else have any more questions about what I read or anything like that?
Richard?
I was just wondering, Gordon, how much your mother knew about the afterlife, or believed, how much she believed in the afterlife.
Well, she knew she wasn't any kind of a practicing psychic, but she was certainly open to that situation. And we discussed it a fair bit in the intervening years, because my father died in 1968 and she didn't die until about 2003 or 2004. So many years went by, and you know, other relatives passed, and it was, she seemed to, and she knew about my developing talents to some degree. And on one occasion, about 3 years before she passed, and she was starting to get a little feeble, but not that much. She was visited by close relatives that had passed, a married couple that she'd known right from when she was a young woman, and they had lived in New Zealand after leaving Scotland, and they came to visit her in a dream. And she said to me, describing it, this vivid dream, that she asked them, why are you here? And they both said, man and wife, oh, we just come by to see you, Nancy. Just come by to see you. And of course, I knew from my reading and experiences that when that happens, it usually means somebody's fairly close to passing. She didn't pass for another couple of years, but I did tell her that at the time, and I'm not sure she was totally in agreement with what I said. But as she got older, I tried to give more specific examples, and was partially successful. She was never closed-minded about it, but I think she just would think she'll deal with it when she gets there, you know?
Yeah. It's just interesting in both cases that they spent time in a hospital.
Yes, yes. Well, I obviously knew about that possibility from other situations, but it was very interesting, and there's a detailed account of it in my book, More Adventures in Eternity. And on several visits. First time I went, my long deceased father was sitting by her bedside, patiently waiting for her to wake up. And I'd contacted him many times over the years because he'd been gone so long. And then I went the next time, and she was up and about. And another visit, I was there, and a medical personnel, probably a doctor, came in, and just as sociable like doctors can be, sort of holding his clipboard in his hand and a white coat and stuff. He leaned over and said, "How are you today, Nancy?" And she looked up and said, "Well, I'm feeling a lot better." And I mean, she was fine. She was just dead, but she still had all the issues, physical and mental issues, that she thought she had before she passed. So I could see how the medical personnel cater to the person's expectations. And then the next time I went, might have been a few weeks later, my father and her were walking in the gardens slowly, like you would walk with an invalid recovering. And so that's kind of how it went.
Did you get to a point where you saw her, fully cognizant of the situation, fully aware?
Oh yes, yes. There was other visits where um, there was she had from a big family, and she was the youngest, so a number of her sisters had passed before her. And I went again. My father was long established because he passed in '68, and I visited him once, and I said, "Oh, where's Nancy?" And he said, "Oh, she's out shopping with her sisters." So again, you can't forget that day-to-day reality of the kind of mid-astral summerland. All the amenities that you would like to have are there. If you want to go to a sports event, it's there. If you want to go to the theater, it's there. If you want to go to a concert, it's there. And they'd gone shopping. So I just mentioned that as an amusing little, anecdote. And later, and I had another lucid dream, very lucid, many years later, where I was with them in a nightclub, an astral plane nightclub, and just like they'd be here, music, drinks. And I'm dancing with my mother, except our feet are not touching the floor. We're dancing on air about a foot off the floor. So again, that was quite some years later. So I don't want to use that as a track of her recovery, but just something, an amusing little detail that I think you would like.
I was just wondering, did she look younger then?
Yes, she got younger. She looked like photographs I'd seen of her as a younger woman, for sure. As you know, almost everyone does. Everyone moves to that ideal age, like a 5-year-old that dies in an accident or whatever. You go back to visit them a while later, and they're sort of like 21, 25 years old, and the old get younger and the young get older.
Something to look forward to.
It certainly is. Believe me, I've had enough of my creaky old bones.
Gordon, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So can you tell us like the first time that you realized that you that you had some kind of psychic ability? How old were you and what was it?
Well, of course, there were events that happened. my rational mind dismissed, and then years later I look back and I go, oh yeah, started way back then, but I didn't really pursue it or pay any attention to it. I was a typical teenager, David. If I tell you a typical 60s teenager, I was obsessed with pop music. I mean, the new single by the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or the Beach Boys was of much more interest to me than what was going on in the world.
Sure.
You have to grow. And I wasn't thinking about psychic things till my father died. And then, I got contact from him. And but the sense of being psychic, well, I didn't really have it, but I did recall many years later, in my mid-50s, I would think, when I was about 3 years old, my mother took in one of her elder sisters who was dying of cancer, and she looked after her in the final months of her life, and I think it was given as an inevitable that she was going to pass. And I'm pretty sure I was no more than 3 years old. And, as 3-year-olds do before kindergarten, there's a lot of times where you're just kind of wandering around the house or playing or whatever. And I walked into the room that my aunt had been sleeping in. And I stood and looked and I watched that, that little kind of misty evanescence that many people report that rises out of a dying person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw that and then repressed the memory for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the sense of being a little bit psychic took a lot longer to develop. And as I may have said many ages ago on this channel, if you'd met me in 1990, any of you, I could have sat down with you and had a coffee and a beer and talked for ages about all the books I'd read on psychic abilities and reincarnation and aliens and UFOs. I was a big reader, but I did not think that I was going to develop in that way myself, but it did happen, and it took me quite by surprise around the mid to late 90s.
I think these books and podcasts, like we're doing now, and all these other ones that are on YouTube, I think it definitely does help develop.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, we talk a lot about the near-death experience on this channel, and great thing it is too. But in the 90s, when I was starting to think about writing my first book on my own lucid dreaming experiences, there was a real flood of near-death experience books, like a lot. And I guess the market was doing well, so publishers kept putting them out. And I'd read quite a few and was quite fascinated by them. And because I'd read mediumistic books, books by mediums and psychics, but this near-death experience thing was a whole new field of interest for me. And this is many years before this stuff appeared on YouTube. But I mean, that's a great advance too, because you can pick up the essence of a near-death experience by watching, I don't know, 2 or 3 videos, and obviously you can watch more, but you get the general idea very quickly.
Yeah. Richard.
Wondering, I've listened to quite a few near-death experiences. I like to watch them on YouTube, see a person, listen to them. But, the experience that you and David described for your mother, I can't recall ever watching a near-death experience account where they said, oh, I came to in a hospital and I was being worked on. It's usually, I'm going into the light, I meet God or I meet relatives and I feel love. I'm just wondering if you've ever run across a near-death experience where they're, in the hospital, in the spiritual hospital setting.
Can I
I
just
believe
mention,
I have, but I don't know if I could quote you one right here and now.
Can I just mention a great aunt of mine?
They're very I guess, very few and far between, because I've watched a lot of them. I haven't run across one yet.
Well, Richard, the interesting thing for me about all this near-death experience stuff, both the old books from years ago and the new videos, is the situation is set up so that the person learns from the experience, maybe often has a very quick life review, and contacts with guides or loved ones. But it's set up so that they can come back and live a sort of rejuvenated experience, more directed towards a spiritual lifestyle. But when we're dealing with people that have died, in a either in a traumatic or a normal illness, aging kind of way, they don't necessarily, in fact, very few of them talk about a life review. So I think, for example, that life review thing is very specific to near-death experiencers, because they need to have a near life review so that they can see through their old limitations, their old materialist outlook, and reform their personalities to a more, how shall I say, refined and spiritual lifestyle.
Well, you're right. I found that the near-death experience seems tailored to the particular person, including their beliefs, and what they experience is meant to be brought back.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just interesting that more kind of mediumistic contacts with either passive or, adventurous, like the sort of thing I do, gives a different view. People, they know they're dead, and they don't feel they're living in the Summerland worlds, very much like the worlds that Anthony Borgia describes in his books. And they don't talk about reincarnation. They don't talk about coming back. They might have heard some vague rumor that you can do it, but I can tell you, with a lot of my relatives, mother, father, sister, they lived through the Depression, World War II, all kinds of difficulties. Believe me, they're not in any hurry to come back.
Well, I wrote a book on reincarnation, which came out just recently, and that was one of the things I noticed, that finding an account of a spirit on the other side who has actually witnessed a reincarnation, I just found that, in all the material I read, and I read a lot of material for the book, I just didn't find anything on that, really. There was mention of it, oh yes, they'll reincarnate, or I've heard they reincarnate, but the actual witnessing of a reincarnation, I have not run across, at least in the literature.
Well, I agree with you generally. There's very few accounts, but one I can recommend, a book we've discussed before, Letters from the Light by Elsa Barker.
Okay.
That has, the main character is a deceased judge who was also a practicing theosophist. So he arrives in the afterlife with a fair bit of knowledge. And he talks about forming a friendship bond with a child who wants to go back and be born to a new mother who will be his favorite teacher from school. And there's quite a detailed account of this in that book.
Yes, but did it actually happen? That's the thing that, in the
Well, you mean in terms of being able to prove it?
Well, at least witness it. In the Paget letters, they talk about, they mention that there is no reincarnation, but they also talk about someone who wants to come back as a boy.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what happened was that he went back, but he didn't go into a body. He just sort of hovered around, other people. But a reincarnation didn't happen.
Oh.
But that was the interesting thing about the Paget letters, that they had people like Madame Blavatsky coming through, and Aristotle, and saying, and even Jesus saying, no, there's no reincarnation. You might talk about it, but it just doesn't happen.
The Paget letters, who was the communicator in that, may I ask?
Oh, shucks,
Pardon?
Well, it's named after I forget his first name, but his last name is Paget.
I see. I'm not familiar with that one, but I'm certainly familiar with that attitude. Like I say, the Anthony Bourdain book, Life in the World Unseen, there is not one mention of reincarnation in that book. Yet, if you go to A Soul's Journey by Peter Richelieu, there's a very detailed account of how one reincarnates.
Yeah. If Richard's been on the Global Gathering twice, and pretty recently, if you haven't listened to his thing on reincarnation, give it a listen. I've listened to it a couple times, and you just go on Wendy's Zoom and you'll find it there. It's excellent. Irene.
Yes. Well, I think there is even up to date the modern evidence about reincarnation, and lots of evidence that can't be disputed from children who've taken their current parents back to where they'd lived with another family, and it's been, confirmed. So, people that, well, there's so many closed-minded people, and everybody thinks they know everything, don't they? So I keep an open mind, and I don't particularly want to come back, I have to say. But if those that do, well, and that are up for it, maybe wiser souls. But I put my hand up originally to talk about a great aunt of mine. My family, I think they believed in God, but they weren't particularly churchgoers or anything like that. But, as a child, things do stick in your mind. And whether this was a little bit of a taster for me to go along my travels, I don't know. But a great aunt of mine who lived with my grandmother, who I lived with for a few years growing up, I remember her telling me that she'd been very ill in hospital, as Richard's question was, did you know of anybody who'd been ill in hospital? And she had, and she said she went to the light and she saw these figures, and she had this feeling of such love, and she didn't want to come back. And then she kept hearing whether it was her sister or what, somebody calling about, you've got a child, you must come back to be with this child. But they weren't particularly religious. And I can't actually say that she ever really changed her ways because of that experience. But it's always a story that stuck with me. And out of all my relations that are in spirit that have come through, she came through once. And the medium asked her why she'd come through. And she said, because I can. And that was her personality. She didn't change here. Maybe she has gone on to change, but if she hadn't have shown herself in that way, I wouldn't have recognised her, you see. So she may have gone on to be a different type of person. But I always remember her saying that she saw all these figures. She'd gone through this white light, this tunnel, and there were all these people there surrounding her. And she felt this wonderful, wonderful love. And she didn't want to come back. But obviously she did, because it wasn't her time. So but we hear so many stories like that, don't we?
Oh yes, for sure. Lots.
Yeah. But it certainly didn't change her. She wasn't any better before she went as she came back.
If we haven't got any more questions right now, there's just a short thing I'd like to read. It's a short quote from William Stead's, that spiritualist from the turn of the century, his book, The Blue Island. which is, I'm sure some of you know, is all about the how the some of the people from the Titanic were retrieved. But I was thinking about this when I had that experience with the long deceased journalist, investigative journalist Danny Casolaro the other night, and thinking, well, you know, I hadn't, other than the documentary that's on Netflix, I hadn't given him any thought for years. But and suddenly he was there. But let me just give you this little quote here. In concentrating the mind on any one spirit person, you are sending out real, live, active forces. These forces pass through the air in precisely the same way, though using a different form of energy, as electric waves do, and they never miss their mark. You concentrate on Mr. A in the spirit world, and immediately Mr. A is conscious of a force coming to him. And this is in a book that I'm reading now called UAPs in the Afterlife. But it makes some very interesting comparisons between what happens around UAPs and the apports that appear in spiritualistic manifestation sessions. And wonderful book. But I was very pleased to come across that quote, because since that contact with the Danny guy, I thought, how did that happen? Because it came very suddenly, and it was just all about me enjoying the depth of the reporting on the documentary. And so I must have sent a thought out to this man, who then came to me on the, how shall we say, the wings of that thought. So, and that's happened a few times in the last couple of years, where somebody unexpected shows up because I've been reading or watching something that concerns them in their earth life. And I'd always wondered about it. Anyway, so there you go. There's a little answer, a little something that we can chew on a little bit.
Yeah.